Morning.
Good morning.
I will call the September 24th Select Board Workshop meeting to order. As a preliminary matter, let me confirm that all members are present and can hear me. I actually don't see everybody. Jason's not here. Oh, no, there he is. Okay. Let's see. Matt Fee. I think Matt stepped away. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Jason Bridges.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, and I'll wait for Matt to come back. We also have Erica Mooney.
Present.
George Aronson. George, thank you. Holly Backus.
Present.
Rob McNeil.
Here.
Greg Tivnan.
Present.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Matt, I'll go back to you. You stepped away for a second.
Yep, hi.
Hi. Chuck Larson.
Present.
John Giorgio.
Present.
Oh, hi, John. You froze up a little bit. Graham Durovich. Graham, can you hear me?
Graham just texted me. She's having some computer challenges, but she is trying to join us by phone.
Okay, thank you. Lauren Sinatra.
Present. Good morning.
Morning, Lauren. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will allow public participation if anyone wants to come in via Zoom webinar. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share the screen of your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting materials are on the town website. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in ways that help generate accurate minutes. Please wait for the chair to yield the floor to you. And any votes, which I don't believe we'll be taking votes today, would be done by roll call, except maybe to adjourn. So with that, I will turn it over to the town manager.
Thank you very much. So we've had an internal group working on solid waste long-term planning for quite a while now, and we're going to take you through some options that have been developed, and it would be great at the end to get some direction from the board as to option or options to explore and pursue a little further, and or what additional information you think you would want to obtain. So I am not quite sure who is going to go first. Rob, are you going to take us through, and then
Yes.
George and others will chime in as needed?
Yep. Thank you,
Okay.
Libby. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the Select Board for having us. As Libby mentioned, the work group that's been assembled includes DPW representatives, finance director, town council, and the town's solid waste consultant, all who are joining us today. Obviously, solid waste management is a big issue here. The enterprise fund is over $10 million now. Long range and long-term planning for the facility is super important. To back up a step, we take a lot of our direction and input from the state, and Mass DEP is currently in the process of revising their long-range strategic plan regarding solid waste master planning. Currently, that draft plan, it was released in September of 19, and they have extended the comment period. So I have sent that around in the packet and as part of the presentation today. We've highlighted it for hopefully the executive version, or the executive summary version, to help hone you in on what we believe is the most important parts of that to understand. But definitely encourage you to go through that and as some really good background information. The state is really focused on what a lot of us are: reducing first, and then managing waste to be reused, recycled, and then only after that disposed of. And so if we follow everything that we do in that order, it's really the best way we can move forward with any program related to solid waste here for the island. The state is making everyone abundantly aware that disposal capacity within the state of Massachusetts, much like the island here, is sunsetting. There's very, very limited disposal capacity remaining in the state of Massachusetts. The town of Nantucket, as you know, has about 10 years left with regard to active landfill disposal that are currently permitted to take waste. The state has been moving towards a waste zero tactic since 2010, which has included some dramatic changes in the waste stream management, including removal, banning of organics from waste streams for disposal. And that has come in the form largely of removing commercial waste, commercial organics from the waste stream. There's all kinds of different programs the state has developed, including sustainable materials recovery program, recycling dividends programs, and others that are all aligned with their strategic plans and goals. Thankfully, the town of Nantucket has been able to take advantage of a lot of these different programs and will continue to do so moving into the future. One future project that we are working on here is developing a pilot colored bag system as sort of a precursor to a potential pay-as-you-throw program. And that is something that we have been exploring and will continue to flesh out here. One thing I would encourage the select board to really look at for solid waste and recycling is to really take an island-wide approach, not just to focus on our facility at the landfill and materials recovery and everything is at that point. I look at it this way: it's almost too late. We want to know, and what I would suggest that we take a look at, the board take a look at, is what is going on before we get it. It's a healthy approach to be able to align yourselves with the state's program of reducing first, then managing the waste to be reused, recycled, and/or disposed of. So what part can we or should we control, and why? And it touches a lot of different departments, not just DPW. We get inputs from sewer department and from all other departments in their normal waste streams, but the sewer department brings us biosolids. Again, just a reminder if you weren't aware of that. We have a tremendous amount of leaf and yard waste that comes in from the island's landscapers and other folks and nonprofits around the island. And we have issues regarding littering. We have plastics that are showing up on the coastline. We have compost issues. We have issues that we're talking about regarding alternative technologies. We're trying to remove hazards from the environment with our household hazardous waste events. And we're also trying to take a look at what can we do within the construction industry to better align with the state's goals of reuse and recycle. A quick thing that DPW facilities is piloting, along with our solid waste recycling coordinator, is implementing on all DPW construction projects for facilities, sorting the construction waste and putting the onus on the contractor for something that we might be able to bring to an island-wide requirement moving forward. So we're working through a lot of this stuff, and we recognize that we want to develop a path forward, if you will. What we've laid out for you today is John Giorgio is going to walk us through the background of our particular facility here, the contract that we currently are in with our vendor, Waste Options Nantucket, and lay out a few options for the town to approach the next contract, or what we're going to move forward with post 2025. We do have a flow chart to follow along with those options. I'd encourage you to pull those out and take a look. And then that'll be followed up with a presentation by George Aronson, our solid waste consultant, to talk a little bit about exploring options and really fleshing these out from a sort of a pre-procurement type of method. So with that, unless there's any specific upfront questions, I'm happy to transition over to John. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. So, as most of you probably know, back in 1999, town meeting authorized the town to enter into a contract for the design, construction, and operation of facilities at the landfill. And that term was for 25 years. The town issued an RFP and selected Waste Options to essentially operate the town's solid waste facilities. That contract expires on November 30th, 2025. And while that's 5 years away, I think the group feels that it's important because of the enormity of the decisions that have to be made that we start this dialogue and process now. The landfill has a number of different components to it. The entire site is leased to Waste Options. And over the years, Waste Options has constructed and operates the composter and the C&D transfer station, whereas the town owns the MRF, the materials recycling facility, the landfill itself, and some ancillary facilities. So in order to look at solid waste options beyond 2025, the town is going to essentially have to repeat the process it went through in 1999, meaning issue a request for proposals, and then obtain town meeting authority to enter into a contract. And, you know, we're going to talk about what the length of that contract should be, and that's going to be driven by what the select board's vision is for solid waste management on the island, which we'll get into in just a moment. One of the things that has hampered the town's ability to really engage in new technologies and options for solid waste disposal is really the restrictions that are contained in the existing agreement. Because Waste Options has taken the position, and there's some merit to it, that essentially any landfill improvements, et cetera, have to be through Waste Options under the existing agreement. So, for example, when we ran out of landfill space for residuals, we negotiated amendment number 6 to the contract, which essentially had Waste Options responsible for the construction of that new landfill cell. And the town had a separate appropriation supported by a bond authorization to pay for that work. I think it's fair to say that that actually went pretty well. I've been working with Rod now on some other major capital improvements and making sure that the procurement of those services complies with current public construction laws, as is somewhat modified by Chapter 30B, which allows these kinds of design build contracts for solid waste facilities. So we've taken the position, and Waste Options has accepted it, that any major construction work, for example, the C&D facility requires a new roof at this point, that we will procure those services through Waste Options, but require Waste Options to obtain 3 quotes to comply with sort of the rudimentary elements of the public construction laws, and also, most importantly, to pay prevailing wages, which are applicable to these kinds of projects. So at some point along the way, it was actually amendment number 1 to the Waste Services Agreement. There was a provision inserted that essentially says at the end of the 25-year term, the town will have the option to purchase the facilities that are owned by Waste Options for $1 million or fair market value, whichever is less. So we do have the option at the end of this term to purchase the composter and the transfer station. We have been engaged with some preliminary discussions with Waste Options about potentially advancing a buyout of the contract. And the biggest problem is that Waste Options currently has owes about $7 million to Sun Life on the bonds that were issued in order for them to construct the facilities initially. And at this point, Waste Options is taking the position that any early buyout is going to have to address the issue of those outstanding bonds. So given that complication, it may well be the wisest move for the town to just not sit out the contract, but let the contract expire on its own terms. The contract does require that Waste Options remove any facilities that it constructed, but we also have this buyout provision. So we have quite a bit of flexibility at the end of this contract. This is going to be driven, however, by economics for waste management. And we're going to have to just see how that plays out. But our current recommendation to the board is to really consider 4 different options for 2025 when the contract expires on its own term. The first would be to negotiate a buyout of the facilities with Waste Option, and then to turn the operation of the facility over to the DPW, which would operate the facility using employees of the DPW, and then contracting out for any major capital improvements in compliance, of course, with all of the applicable procurement laws. This would return ultimate control of the facilities back to the town. And, we could explore various technology improvements that I think George is going to get into a little bit later. The second option would be, again, to let the contract expire, have negotiate a buyout of all the facilities with waste options, and then rather than the DPW operating the facility in-house, the town would contract with an operator who would come and operate the facility, but not make any capital improvements. Those would still be made by the town. And if we're not requiring any significant investment in capital of a new operator, we would recommend under that scenario that the town consider a shorter term contract, perhaps 5 years. And that way we could avoid some of the pitfalls of the current contract, which is loaded with financial protections for waste options. For example, there's essentially a minimum tonnage requirement. It's a put or pay provision that the town has to pay each year, regardless of the amount of waste that's actually processed. And the contractor would not be responsible, as I said, for capital improvements, which have caused some problems in the past. The third option would be to essentially continue with a new long-term contract, let's say 25 years. We would put that out to bid. Waste options could certainly bid on that, as they could on the 5-year short-term operations contract. But we would essentially replicate the current contractual arrangement with either waste options or a new company, depending on the outcome of the bidding process. And we would update and modernize the agreement to make sure that the town's interests are protected. And then the fourth option is essentially to let the contract expire, either build a new transfer station, state of the art, or retrofit the existing C&D transfer station and ship all of the waste produced off island. And essentially, the town would be getting out of the solid waste processing and disposal business. Now, under this option, of course, the town would no longer be utilizing the landfill. And so we would, which is, of course, inevitable, be responsible for capping and closing the landfill. And as the board knows, over the last several years, the town has received bond authorization from town meeting to meet the financial assurance requirements that DEP has imposed to ensure that there's sufficient funds available to cap and close the landfill. So those are essentially the four options that we're presenting to the board for consideration. And one of the things that is going to, we think, drive this policy decision is by first going out and testing the market to see what interest there might be from waste options and any other vendor to potentially come in and operate this facility in one of the, at least the first three options that we've talked about. And in order to test that market, what we're recommending as the next step is that the town conduct really a hybrid procurement. We would issue what's called a request for expressions of interest, which George has put together, and a copy of the draft is attached to your packet, is in your packet material. And it would essentially ask vendors for ideas and interest in assisting the town in handling solid waste activities going forward after 2025. And once we received those results, we would then be in a position to put together, to really make a final decision on what makes the most sense, and then put together an RFP, which would fully comply with 30B, to receive proposals and then award a contract, either short-term or long-term. Are there any questions about those options at this point?
Anybody? Matt?
Yeah, just are those the only options, or are those the most obvious to start with?
Well, they're clearly, Matt, the most obvious to start with. I think we all recognize that any one of those could be tweaked. And there might be sub options within each of the four, but those are the four that we thought of, because, I think almost anything you want to do with that landfill, you can fit under one of those options. Let me put it that way.
Thank you, John. With that, I would like to introduce George Aronson to talk a little bit about what we have in mind for a RFEI process. Thanks, George.
Okay, thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone on the board. Good morning. I just want to take John's concept the next step, because as John laid out clearly, whatever road the town goes down is likely to involve some level of bidding process at its end. But before we can do that, the town needs to know what to ask for in proposals. And you have to be careful what you're asking for. You have to know also that there will be vendors who will actually respond to whatever the town asks for, and preferably some competition and multiple vendors who can do that. And also, and to go to Matt's point, the town would not want to exclude or write an RFP in a way that excludes an option that in fact might be better than what they're asking for. So rather than do it in one step, putting together what the town thinks is the best RFP for the best request, we're looking at doing it in two steps. And the first step, again, as John described briefly, is to go to the market basically asking vendors of various types what you're interested in, what might you actually bid on Nantucket, and what's out there perhaps that we haven't thought of. And then given that level of information, after an upfront process to talk to vendors, to understand and define contractual issues better before we start, then when the material comes in, then the town has a basis for making decisions on how to direct the RFP and what to go out to bid for. So that's the basic point. Don't go out and asking for proposals until you know what the market is telling, what might be out there, and you have better information. And then in fact, the RFP process would be a lot easier because we're acting from a position of knowledge rather than trying to guess what the market might supply. So that's the basic philosophy here in two steps. What we've done, and again, what was provided was basically the introduction of the draft RFEI, and we'd go into a little more detail, but we're going to ask a few questions. What is the town procuring? What terms? What is the market out there? How do they respond? And we've looked at three broad areas. First is in terms of contract operations. Is there really a firm other than Waste Options that's interested in operating the facilities at the landfill? If the answer is no, and you put out an RFP and you only get one bid, you're kind of stuck with it. So you really want to know if you can have competition before you go out to bid and what the dimensions of that competition are. So that's one issue. So what I envision there is asking, first of all, some very simple description of what's happening now, and then asking questions about the terms, the business terms, the scopes of agreement, and basically variations on compensation. How might the town go about procuring that and see what comes back? But it's not only figuring out what the questions are, it also means going through a process to talk to potential vendors. On island, we have a pretty good idea who they are. There may be off-island vendors who we can find that might be interested, or maybe there aren't, but it's worth calls to the large integrated solid waste management companies that are active in this area in Southeast Massachusetts, be they Waste Management Republic or others. Other vendors who are in the composter business, We Care Environmental, there's a new one in California, or there are a few others that have indicated. And then frankly, some general advertising of the opportunity through some of the solid waste trade industry groups who are set up with large mailing lists and contacts. So let's find out who's out there, who might be interested in contract operations. If there are some interested parties, that's great. We can have some competition. If not, at least we know that going in and can, take the next steps accordingly. It's been a lot of talk about maybe the town should just shut down the Nantucket Road operation and transfer everything to the mainland. Well, it's time to turn the talk into how would that actually work if somebody proposed it. And so there are a couple pieces of that. What does that mean in terms of facilities on the island? What does that mean in terms of disposal options on the mainland? And as Rob said up front, that's a difficult situation now that Massachusetts is looking at exporting waste to Pennsylvania, Ohio, and even South Carolina by truck and train. So does the town really want to get into that market? Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Let's find out. And then the big issue, or one of the big issues, which is how do you get it from the island to the mainland? We know there are issues with the Steamship Authority ferry and its use. And if you add a whole new set of trucks using that ferry, carrying solid waste, what are you going to do to make sure that process works, to make sure it's odor-free and environmentally acceptable? Let's ask those questions. And there are vendors who do this. I mean, we've made some preliminary inquiries. There are vendors who, for example, supply equipment to Caribbean islands who are shipping material from island to island. This is done in Europe. There are other people who do this. The question is, would it work here, and is there interest here? Let's ask the question before we make a commitment to going out to bid for a specific system. And when we have an understanding of what those answers are, then we have a better sense of what to ask for. Maybe nobody's interested. Maybe it just doesn't work, but we don't know, and we don't want to presume. So let's find out from the market what's out there. And then the third category is what I'll call new technology. And this is actually in the industry. We're seeing a lot of interest in new technologies for managing not only solid waste, but plastics as an individual stream, and various other parts of the waste, yard waste in some cases. There's been a citizen warrant article proposed about checking out alternative technology. Well, before anybody goes out to bid, maybe the thing is to contact the vendors and give them a chance to put in front of the town what they're offering. And you can do that with a fairly finite set of questions. Here are the town's waste streams. Here's how it's being collected now. Here's where it's going. And a little bit about town product markets for electricity and/or liquid fuels. If somebody could look at that and come back and say, wow, here's a proposal for a facility with a small footprint that fits at the landfill that converts plastics to marine diesel fuel that the ferry could use, or home heating oil, and any number of products, that would be something worth looking at. On the other hand, if it turns out that nobody can do that at the scale that works in Nantucket, that the seasonality just raises issues that complicate the economics in a way that they just can't deal with, and in other things, we need to know that too before we go out to bid. So again, that's the third issue. And again, it's a fairly straightforward question to ask and to advertise the question as who's out there. Where there are a couple vendors who it's obvious we should probably call to see if they're interested, and then generally find out who is out there and who would be interested in operating at the specific scale of Nantucket with its specific challenges as an island community, and with its seasonality, which affects so much of the economics of what happens for this type of operation on Nantucket. So I think those are the three areas of questioning. Who might be a contract operator? Who might be interested in participating in the various parts of a new system to bring waste from the island to the mainland for disposal or processing, and what is out there in technology that might work with the scale, with the type of waste and the quantities of waste that Nantucket has and the markets that Nantucket has for electricity and or other liquid fuel products. So I think that's how we framed it. I think, again, to address Matt's concern, by doing this, you also can put in catch-alls, and if some vendor, through your publicity, has a system that the town hasn't anticipated, this becomes an opportunity for them to provide information, and then the town can consider how to integrate that into the other, into what it might procure. So that's the proposal. If you boil it down into a targeted, publicity within the industry and asks not that many questions, it's not that hard to do. And then the real question is, do vendors respond? You get information that helps? Or if vendors tell you they're not interested, what does that say as well? And then you've got some information to go back and use as the basis for the next level of decision. So I'm happy to take questions on that as well.
Thank you, George. Madam Chair, I'd like to open it up to discussion or questions, and then we can sort of boil it down from there.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Does anybody have questions? Kristen?
Thank you, Don. Rob, in the packet, there were a lot of opportunities for state grants and kind of collaboration with the state. I'm assuming that would kind of go hand in hand with whatever we move forward, but do you just want to talk about kind of how we're working with the state or what information we might be using from them?
Sure. So thank you for that. Any programs that are available currently, we have tried to leverage. I would say it's probably helpful to have Graham weigh in on the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program and Recycling Dividends Program, the specifics of those programs. I will just simply say that those are quite small scale in the grand scheme of things relative to the entire enterprise. However, one of the larger grants that we were pursuing or will be able to pursue is possibly in the pursuit of a pay-as-you-throw program, which is right now something that 30% of all communities in Massachusetts have as a way to reduce their overall waste production. And that also helps users that are creating waste, starting with homeowners down through commercial producers, to do the sorting at home. And it's basically a cost disincentive program where you pay for the bag that you put material into. It's something that we are approaching delicately, and the benefit of having, for instance, different colored bags to align with the various waste streams, we see as a massive benefit for our particular facility to really assist with the efficiencies within that site. The state, in the discussions we've had with the state regarding piloting a colored bag program, they're very excited about it because other communities are doing similar type of things. Here we have several additional waste streams because we do have the composter. So we're trying to, as you know, clean up that stream. So we're feeding the composter only compostable waste. So we will continue to pursue grants, but I will say that there's no real magic bullet or panacea that is going to solve the island's waste situation just based on the limitations that have been laid out here. It really does come back to making best use of and most efficient use of our very, very limited resource, which is that landfill disposal space. If we back it all the way out, it's really about reducing what we use, and then only after that, managing the waste most efficiently for reuse, for recycling, and then the very leftover is what's disposed of. And I want to remind everybody that the only thing that the town is currently disposing of into the landfill is materials that are going through the composter that shouldn't be there. So it's the non-recyclable. It's the Nernic. It's Nernic that's still included. People are still including into their waste stream for the composter. That goes through the composter, gets separated at the back end, and ultimately baled and landfilled. If we do a better job of sorting and cleaning up our waste streams, that would dramatically reduce the amount that we need to use our landfill.
I just have to say I have some reservations on pay as you throw. I'm worried. I'm worried with our transient community that this could be an invitation for illegal dumping. And I just want to put that out there now. I'm not sure that that's the direction we should definitely be heading in.
And John, I want to say that today's proposal is not anything having to do with pay as you throw. I'm simply raising the awareness that I encourage the board to look at solid waste and recycling as an island-wide approach. And today's really focused on the facility itself.
No, I understand. I just wanted to put that out there now before we get too far down the road of it, that I do have reservations. Yep. And I think there's been a number of things that we've done in the past, like making mattresses free so that they don't end up dumped out in the moors for disposal and that kind of thing. So I just, I think there are pros and cons that I see. And I also worry that it puts a burden on so many local year-rounders who are the ones that don't pay for the extra trash pickup too.
I would say there's a real balance between the environment and personal responsibility. And that's really the whole discussion. And we can certainly get into that.
No, I don't want to get too far down that road. I just wanted to make a comment on it now.
Sure.
Mary Longacre has her hand up, and then I'll go to you, Matt. Mary?
Thank you, Don. I have a couple of thoughts to offer, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. First is that I hope that one thing that will be considered is trying to shift our culture to be less throwaway. And in particular, Rob mentioned, a lot of yard waste. If we could reduce the, acreage devoted to mowed lawns and privet, that would certainly reduce the yard waste. That would be a cultural shift. The one of the options that really would concern me is the idea of a 25-year contract. If you look at the way that our population has changed in the last 20 years, for instance, if you look at the potential for climate change effects, especially at the landfill over the next 25 years, if you try and estimate, what our economic activity is going to be, there are a lot of uncertainties. And the idea of a 25-year contract is that things will continue or that they can be forecast accurately. And I don't think that we have that kind of knowledge. We're about to embark on redoing the master plan. We're about to embark on, I believe, a build-out study. We're about to get the results of the census, over the next 24 months for all of these. And I hope that that information will be available I want to say that I'm very encouraged by the fact-finding and the open-mindedness that I see in the documents that were presented today.
Thank you, Mary.
I think that's it, but thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, Mary made one of my points. One thing we should be saying is, are we even going to be building, out there? Anything because of sea level rise, the storm tide pathways go right near that property. at some point in the very kind of near future, 20 years, 30 years, are we going to be hard armoring the dump? Hard armoring the landfill? I look at it and think, what technology can we do that will allow us to actually mine that over time so that, when the sea level rises there, we've actually got an empty landfill. If we're doing long-term planning, we should be really thinking, what is the technology will get us there? I think sea level rise is real. I know it's real, and I know it's going to impact us, especially in that area. Maybe the plan should be to be doing a transfer station or a facility at higher ground out by the airport. The pay as you throw, I'm with Dawn on that a bit, but there might be an in between where if you do it, where it's free. If you do it properly, it's free, and if you don't, then you pay. That may be something that would work. You'd be giving people incentive to do it right. And the other part is the state is focusing on commercial properties, and getting the commercial in line, and I think that's great. But I think Nantucket, we have not a lot of commercial, except that 80% of our dwellings are used commercially. So those are the ones we have to focus on, along with the commercial buildings. We need to look at the second homeowners and all the houses. And Rob is right about we should be looking at this island-wide. And so if we can get the commercial people to put all their organics into a green bin, we should get every house to do the same thing. And I think that would go a long way to cleaning up the waste stream if we made an effort. If you did the green bin and you did the colored bags and everything came in properly, you didn't pay anything. And if you didn't, then you paid money. That to me would be sort of the angle I would go. And then the question I have, the other concern I have, we hoped by going to waste options that it would, make it easier, and it actually has made it more difficult because we haven't had the flexibility. So part of me likes number one, but I think it's too soon to tell any of this because we've got to put more meat on the bone on any of those options. I think it would be premature for us or the board, or the staff to say we recommend one over the other. I think finding, doing a fact finding and seeing what other options are available, I think is a really smart first step. So that's all for now.
I do think it's going to be very important for us to really explore and vet all of the issues with doing a transfer station and transporting all our waste off island. I think there's a lot of people in the community that want to see us explore that, and I think we have to come to terms with the reality of what that would look like in terms of construction of a facility, location of a facility, and then we don't have a truly commercial dock on Nantucket. And what does that look like in terms of mingling the commercial dock space with our sort of everyday travel and commuting space? And where would our waste be going to? And are those facilities ready to accept it? And what's the cost? So I think we do really need to vet that option, but I know that there will be big hurdles as well.
I'd just like to add to some of that in previous comments. Certainly, as you note, Matt, these are the options as laid out are preliminary. We fully expect as we go down the road with more information to start to vet those with full financial analysis as we come closer, so that ultimately a better decision or an informed decision could be made by the board. A couple other things. Mary's comment about the contract length. I know John has provided some information on that, but typically what we'll see, mostly due to a lot of uncertainty in world markets regarding solid waste and recycling, is we would tend to believe that much shorter term contracts would be expected because things are changing so rapidly around the world. And So this is not something that we expect to have a decision made on and then forget about. But this is something that is going to take at some level, continuous analysis, even during that short-term contract, so that the next short-term contract can be appropriately adjusted and be able to be reacted appropriately to the ongoing changes that are expected to continue in those world markets. And lastly, back to the original question from Christy. And sorry, Erica, just a quick note. I did get a text during this from Graham that she was unable to unmute to speak, but just wanted to remind everyone that the DEP grants that are available align very much with their stated strategic planning. So namely zero waste, all of the things that are talked about and that we've presented regarding recycling, reducing with the pay-as-you-throw programs, all of those things are grant incentivized to align with the state's programs. And back quickly, just one point on hazardous waste. The town has 6 events. That's really, from where I come from in Central Mass, 6 events a year is really pretty amazing. It's a great opportunity to remove from your town, and particularly in this case, remove from the island all these materials, not from just a household standpoint, but we've extended it here through your support to extend that to very small quantity generators at the commercial end of things. This past event on September 19th was a record event. It's the first time that we've been over 200 vehicles. 226 vehicles came through our site on Saturday. So I got to say, this is a program that continues to evolve, and I think it's an effort from your support down through our advertising and just getting the word out to people. And I think people are really responding well. So we're going to continue to monitor that and make suggestions to the board based on that. But I just wanted to highlight that as an example of things that are going very well for us.
Madam Chair, this is Graham Durovich. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Graham.
Okay, great. Thank you to whoever unmuted me. Thank you. Rob covered a lot of what I wanted to say, but I do have to mention in terms of free programs, we continue to find dumping, even though it is free to bring hazardous waste and household waste. So I would be curious about exploring other options, as Matt discussed and other people did, because obviously having free waste is not also working. There were 2 instances in the last week with hazardous waste being dumped illegally. So obviously a great concern for us in our water.
Thank you. Where are we at with
George? I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to.
Chuck, or sorry, who had their hand up? Oh, George, and then Chuck.
Okay, now I just wanted to, first of all, the comments are very helpful in terms of figuring out questions that we need to ask. There's a lot of interest in vendors in what I'll call modular facilities, which can actually be moved. So that might be a feature that's of interest to the town if we're looking long term. The other area, which is what I'll call seasonal storage, which is you can actually bale and wrap and secure waste in the summer and then move it in the winter. So there are different ways to address things like seasonality and the need for odor-free transport that are, special challenges on Nantucket. What I also heard is that term of any agreement is going to be an issue. And so if there's a new facility that needs a long-term agreement, we need to think about if that's going to be something that the town can do or not do, along with other contracts and times. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention is that this presumes that instead of the waste services agreement, which was one contract covers all, we're doing or approaching what I'll call unbundling the services, hopefully to get more transparency so that going forward, the town will have a better sense of what each individual service and waste stream costs, as opposed to trying to figure out what they cost because of all the cross subsidies in the prior arrangements. So I think these are some of the goals and responses to some of the points that were made.
Thank you, Chuck, and then Matt. Chuck Larson.
Thank you. Yeah, Madam Chair. Rob, and John and George, thank you for putting together such a good package of information. Very helpful. I'm going to probably steal a quote from Matt. I don't think we're thinking big enough. In the beginning, we talked about the hierarchy of waste management, such as reducing waste, reusing waste, recycling, and disposal. These are elements that I think are part and parcel to looking at what our long-term strategy should be, somehow factored into the conversation with these particular vendors, because you can't really design a solution until you know what your inputs are. And so it seems like our conversation immediately jumped to disposal or maybe recycle, but I think we need to think this is a system of systems, and somehow to draw that out. And certainly I'd be happy to help and have a conversation along that line. But I think there are also some key outcomes that we want to identify as well. Is one, we haven't even talked about, I haven't even heard PFAS mentioned. But certainly PFAS is not something that's necessarily generated in our waste, but it's certainly, concentrated through our methods of, reducing and disposing of it. We that's on the radar. We need to probably start, having a conversation or some information around that. Maybe that falls under new technology. But anyhow, I think that falls under the umbrella of, whatever we do, not only, it improves the environment. It's not only environmentally friendly, but it improves it. And that might go back to Matt's comment that, hey, if our current landfill and cells are starting to inundate with higher water, we need to reduce that environmental risk. Another area, and I hope Lauren's still on the line, is really, another outcome could be, energy use, and then greenhouse gas production. I think those are all elements that are going to become important in the future. You did touch on transportation and logistics. Certainly a key piece, as Nantucket is an island, and just if we ended up barging, what that would look like, and port access. And kind of the bigger umbrella is looking at maybe having a self-sufficient process, and that comes back to zero waste, as Rob mentioned. I think we need to kind of think how all that could be integrated into this longer term planning options for the island. And I'm happy to help or share more ideas, but just wanted to get a few of those ideas out there.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, Chuck, you said a lot of what I said way better than I did, so thank you. What do we know the makeup of the? It's not a question. We should know the makeup of what's in the Hill approximately, and be able to give that to people, because that would be our input. That would be the input that would be going in to different technologies, to come out as power or something else maybe. So we need to know that. And just for the board to know, one of the best years we had it out at the landfill was when the digester went down, and we saved, I'll have the number wrong, but we saved $300,000, $400,000 over a few months because we weren't operating it. We didn't have that electrical cost for a good amount of time. And so the idea of doing it seasonally, or doing it somewhere else seasonally with the right inputs, with the inputs that can't be composted, is an attractive one. I think that I'll channel Rita for a minute. It's our waste, it's our responsibility. And I think there is a way for us to do it if we realize, we aren't going to get the zero waste in my lifetime. with the current laws as they are. Stop and Shop is still going to bring in a bunch of stuff. Everyone else is going to, no offense to them, a lot of other things are going to come that we're going to have to deal with. Plastic isn't disappearing in the near future. And so whatever we do has to be realistic to what is actually happening. And so, how do we set something up that can deal with that reality? And maybe it's a short-term reality, maybe it's 20 or 30 years, but it's, the goal is zero waste, but the reality, even, is it's still going to come for a while, and we've still got a whole pile of it that we're going to have to deal with. So we have to make sure those are factored in.
Thanks, Matt. Well, Madam Chair, I just wanted to add to that simply that a reminder of the DEP solid waste master plan goals that were set, kind of riding on those same discussion points. They have revised their disposal reduction goals. They set some very dramatic goals in their last solid waste master plan. And they realized that I think an 80% reduction in disposal by 2020 landed them somewhere in the neighborhood of about 18%, which was impressive, but certainly not as dramatic as they had hoped. So they took some more impressive steps, but their new solid waste master plan talks about reducing disposal by 30% by 2030. And then it tacks onto that a far more aggressive goal by 2050 of reducing disposal by 90%. So, and then the third goal is, again, to reduce the toxicity of the solid waste stream. And, I think, again, it would be very helpful for the board to consider what the state is really setting the stage for statewide, and to start to align our goals in that way. Even if we're looking at doing short-term contracts with a potential vendor, or just short-term goals setting for our facility here, having some island-wide goals that are longer term, and really measuring those and seeing not just how DPW can affect the change and outcome of that, but looking at all the departments and all the other ways that you as policymakers can start to look at this as a complete and total island-wide system. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? The board want to
Move to adjourn?
Sure. If there's further direction that could be given today.
David Gray has his hand raised.
Oh, sorry, David.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
One piece that I haven't heard mentioned at all is, what are we going to do with our biosolids for wastewater? This could have a dramatic impact to us if there's certain operations or closures at the landfill. Currently, right now, the Northeast is experiencing a huge problem with disposal of biosolids, sludge cake, etc. Canada to get rid of it. So this, whatever gets done at the landfill, we need to take and consider what impacts that could have with us. I'm going to touch on something that I'm not going to go deep into it, but we are currently exploring some new technologies that are out there, only because we're trying to look forward down the road with PFAS, removal, destruction, etc. So we are actively involved in some seriously advanced technology for sludge disposal and elimination or reduction, but also potentially some other waste streams that could come from a landfill or recycler to help with that, which would also generate excessive amounts of electricity for us, which would offset some other stuff and carbon footprint, et cetera. But I just needed it to get on there that I have not heard any discussion as far as what impacts anything that's done will take and have on this department. Thank you.
George?
Yeah, David, you wanted to take this opportunity because, yeah, I mean, biosolids now are going to the composter. That might need to change, and PFAS are a wild card that could change a whole lot of things, and we need to understand and address how that's going to figure into all the decisions.
Thank you. Chuck?
Yeah, just to follow up, does the digester need the biosolids from David, or can it be self-sufficient? Looking at, linking if there's a dependency there. And I don't know if you can answer that, but I imagine there's benefit to having the biosolids in the digester, but could it operate without it? Or what amount is needed as a minimum?
Madam Chair, this is Graham. Could I answer that?
Yes, please.
Chuck, so there's a similar operation, or there was until April in Marlboro, same composter. They actually don't put biosolids into the composter, didn't rather, because they found that it actually made the whole process much more challenging and made a less beneficial product at the end in terms of finding an end market. So it could be an advantage almost, or something that we could decouple and think about in other ways. And I know David's been exploring other ways with a digester, anaerobic digester.
So I think as we look at solutions, just understanding that there isn't necessarily a link dependency there. That maybe for Nantucket, it works, but that's a great example with Marlboro.
George?
Yeah, just to be clear on Marlboro, first of all, disclosure, I am an owner-operator of an anaerobic digester in New Bedford that accepts the effluent from the Marlboro facility, so I've actually have lab results on what they do. And I'm going to push back and say that, in fact, there are lots of benefits to having the biosolids in there. That's a complicated trade-off, too complicated for this particular session. Mm-hmm. But it's certainly something that needs to be explored, because biosolids are going to have to go somewhere. PFAS may make that very difficult. There are very few solutions on the mainland, and it's going to be a difficult question. So let's just leave it at that. But and I know there are a lot of discussions that maybe some of the staff have to go online and to understand, where that effort ought to be directed.
David Gray. David, do you mean to still have your hand up?
Yes, Don, sorry, I was still muted. George, thank you for that, and Graham as well. It could have a drastic impact on our operations. I just wanted to make sure it was out there. And not only are we looking at an anaerobic digester system potentially, we just did a feasibility study. It's just completing that now. There's some other technology that we are very actively pursuing for possible pilot program on the island at the beginning of the year. So we're trying to do our best looking into the future, but I wanted to make sure that we were included in any of the discussions. So thank you for that, Madam Chair.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot more to be continued. Matt, did you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Yep, move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Matt Payne?
Aye.
Christy Tarantella?
Aye.
Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Thank you all very much. Great discussion. Great presentation.
Thank you.